Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Meet the Author. Today, I have Hannah here with me. Hannah, thank you so much for jumping on with me
Thank
today.
you for having me. I'm excited.
So happy that you're here. So, I always like to start these author interviews with like a little kind of icebreakery question. So, I have to know, do you consider yourself more of a chocolate or a vanilla person?
Ooh, chocolate for everything but ice cream. I like a vanilla ice cream because then you can add whatever you want to it. Like you can go fruity, you can go desserty.
That's
It's a good
fair.
base.
That's fair. I like
Yeah.
that. You can do a lot. I feel like with chocolate, it's like,
You're kind of locked in
yeah, you're
with
kind
the
of
vibe.
yeah,
Yeah.
like fruits, maybe you could put like strawberries, so then it would be like chocolate covered strawberries, but everything else
Yeah.
you don't wanna add as much.
No, yeah. You can't put like mangoes on chocolate. That'd get weird.
I don't think I would want to eat that.
No. I mean, what if it was offered to me, would I eat it? Probably. But would I make it myself? No.
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for jumping on here today and being willing to talk with me. I always like to kind of start these interviews too and just have you give an introduction to yourself if people maybe are stumbling upon this for the first time and is like, I don't know this person, but I would love to know more about them. Kind of just explain, who you are, where you're from, and just a little bit about you.
Sure. My name's Hannah Whitten. I am the author of the Wilderwood duology and the Nightshade trilogy. The second book, The Hemlock Queen, is coming out next week, April 9th. And I live in Tennessee. I write things that I think are fun and hopefully other people also think are fun. Um, and yeah, wow, that was a really inspired introduction. I hope that everyone who is stumbling upon this for the first time is just rapturously taken by that.
Love it so much. So obviously, I think it's safe to say your fantasy books, I mean, they kind of picked up and kind of went crazy a little bit.
Yeah, way more than I expected them to.
I love it. I love it. So kind of explain, well, let's start with your original duology,
Yeah.
how that process was for you writing them, getting those out there, and then obviously we'll focus on the newer one with Hemlock Queen coming out
Sure.
next. But let's talk about
Yeah.
the original first. Well, maybe haven't read them, like why they should go and pick those up.
Yeah, so my first duology, the first book is called For the Wolf, the second is called For the Throne, and they're kind of like fractured fairy tales. The first one is like if Beauty and the Beast and Red Riding Hood had a baby, and it was also your favorite 2000s emo band's concept album. Like that's the vibe. And then the second book, For the Throne, has got it's like Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, a little bit of like Bluebeardy influence. And I call that one my Road Trip Through Hell book. So like those are the two vibes that you're getting here. Um,
Amazing.
I have the pitches for those down. And so the first book I'd always written just for fun whenever I was a kid, but never really for pursuing publication. And it wasn't until I was in my mid 20s and I had just had my first child and had like dropped back to working part time instead of full time that oh, a motorcycle just went past very loudly. Um, that I like had time to kind of sit down and decide that I was going to write something good. I had written things before that were not good, but for the wolf, I wrote mostly just for me. I was having a really hard time mentally at the time. I had a lot of postpartum depression, it was super fun. And I just needed something that was kind of my own and was just something that belonged just to me. And so I just shoved every trope that I liked into that book. It was the most self indulgent thing ever. And it wasn't until I finished it that it was like, oh, I think that this is good enough to be like an actual book. And so then I started researching how one makes an actual book, and figured out like querying and how it's this like multi-year process and decided, okay, I'm going to actually pursue this. And it took a very long time. I queried, I think, for about 2 years. I rewrote the book like 3 times in that 2 year period, rewrote it again whenever I signed with my agent. And then it was a long submission process because originally we submitted the book as YA, even though I
Mhm.
had written it as new adult, because this was like immediately post Court of Thorns and Roses blowing up. And so everybody was like, ah, new adult is going to be this new thing. And then publishing was like, no, it's not. Just kidding. So I had been advised by people that I should age it down and make it YA. So I did, even though I was like, I don't really feel like this is a YA book, but you guys know more than me, so sure. Um, So we submitted it as YA first and got a lot of near misses. And most of the feedback was like, this doesn't feel like a YA book. It feels like it should be older. So we revised it to adult. And once we did that, it actually sold pretty quickly. And yeah, and it blew up in a way I don't think any of us were really expecting, which was really, really cool. And that's how I got here.
I love that though, that, your journey, you started it because you were doing something for you.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, I mean, I feel like I've done a lot of these, and so many authors, when I talk to them, I mean, y'all, very similar people are like, I just had a baby, or I just had a really big life. I mean, obviously, that's a huge life,
Yeah.
but it's like something happens, and they're like, I need to go back to myself. Like, I need to
Mhm.
find myself again. And I love that you took this and took that opportunity and wrote, the story. But also, I love that you knew the story all along, how it should have been, and then you did your little query things, you pointed
Yeah.
out, but then it circled back to how it should have been the whole time.
It was very much like a full circle kind of moment that kind of like validated my trust in myself creatively, which was really nice. So,
That's awesome. So did it make the process a lot easier, like, once you had like,
yes.
when you went to go to the next one, that you were just like, "Okay, I know this. I know myself now. I've been through
Yeah.
this process, like, this is gonna be way easier."
Yeah, like For the Wolf was like the book that taught me how to write a book. And so every subsequent one from then on, I won't say necessarily is easier, but I have a much better idea of like what I'm doing, what my weaknesses are, which is a really big thing. Because like at this point, whenever you're first starting out and you get an edit letter, it's like your world comes crashing down every time because it's like, how dare you think I need to fix things in this perfect baby? And now I send it off and I'm like, please, I can't look at this anymore. I need you to tell me what to fix.
You're like, "Please give me the harshest
Please
critiques.
help me. Yeah.
Let me get better." I developmental edited for my friend, and I'm like getting into that too. But
Yeah.
when I first got into it, it's the same thing. I was like, I don't want to give you like super harsh critiques, and she was like, I need them.
Please. Like I'll send it to my editor like with notes in the margins already. That's like, I know this doesn't work. I just don't know how to fix it.
Like, please make me sound smarter here. Or
Yeah.
whatever.
Tell me what
That-
to do.
That's awesome. I love that. So obviously, duology did amazing. Really, I think shot your name out there. I know that's how I was introduced to you, was through the
Yeah.
duology. So then when the Foxglove King came out, I was like, whoa. I remember I was not paying attention, I guess, book world. I don't know. I remember I like walked into Barnes and Noble one day and I saw it sitting on a table and I was like, pretty. And I just like started looking at it, and then I like saw your name and I was like, wait a second.
I know that person.
I know this author. And then I was like, well, I'll buy it now. So I did. But so fun. So, okay, now obviously we'll pivot a little bit. New
Yeah.
series, new book coming out. Without giving huge spoilers away, obviously, for the first book, in case someone's like, oh, book comes out next Tuesday. Okay, like I got to go read this
Yeah.
first. What can people expect more in this series?
Ooh, okay. So this series is kind of like a complete 180 from the Wilderwood duology. Wilderwood is very like mystical forest, kind of limited cast. And this one is like we're in the middle of a city, in the middle of a royal court. There's a bazillion people in the cast. The world is a lot bigger and a lot more involved. Like there's just a lot more moving pieces here, which was very intimidating, but I wanted to do like as a challenge. So this book series follows Lore. She is a poison runner in the city of Delaire, and she can control mortem, which is the magic of death, which is a punishable offense if you are not one of the king's monks, essentially. Like they're allowed to use it, nobody else is. So she tries to like keep it on the DL that she can do this. But whenever she is on a job one day, it goes terribly wrong. She accidentally raises a horse from the dead. You know, whomst among us has not accidentally raised a horse from the dead whenever we're having a bad work day?
Cool.
And things spiral from there, and she ends up in the royal court, kind of blackmailed into working for the king, who was not a great guy. And in the second book especially, there's a lot more going on under the surface as far as the gods and the religion of the world and how they're affecting what's going on today.
I love that. And I feel like, I think it's cool how you said, this cast is a lot bigger and stuff like that. But I feel like,
Yeah.
especially people who again love fantasy, we love that. We want to like
Yeah.
because especially when you have not necessarily like, I mean, side characters, but like when you have a bigger cast, there's a lot more other characters and like entwining things.
Yeah, a lot more to, like, bounce off of.
And you find those attachments, like people will be like, "Oh, I love this person," and someone else may be like,
Yeah,
"I don't love them, but I love them," you know? And it's like so
yeah.
funny how everyone relates to all the different characters because you give us so many to like attach to.
There's someone for everyone. You just have to look for 'em.
You just have to look, and then they're there. They're for you. You promise.
Yes, you found one. Great. It's like Pokemon.
Kind of, I love that. What is your typical writing process like now that you've finished, you've completed a duology, you're about to publish the second of this series. When you go sit down and you're like, oh, I have this idea obviously in your
Mhm.
head, you kind of have started to plot it out. What does that look like when you're
Ooh,
maybe doing a new book series or just like for one specific book if you want to just use like the Hemlock Queen for
yeah.
example?
So I'm much more of a planner now than I used to be. I used to just completely pants the entire draft, and now that I have deadlines, I can't do that anymore. I have to, like, know what I'm doing. So, but I still kind of try to, like, harness that pantser excitement. So, typically what I'll do is whenever I get an initial idea, I will go ahead and sit down and start writing
Mhm.
and just kind of see how far that initial excitement will take me, which is typically like 4 or 5 chapters before it's like, "Oh, a plot needs to, like, be materializing at this
Mhm.
point." And that is when I kind of take a step back and start more, like, brainstorming. So for me, it's a lot of I like make a playlist and a Pinterest board, like very millennial of me, and start listening to the playlist a lot and like just kind of getting my finger on the vibe that I want the story to have even before I really know the plot, because those two things inform each other a lot for me. And once I kind of know how I want a story to feel is whenever I start figuring out exactly how I'm going to do that. So I don't necessarily call it outlining because it's not like neat at all. But and I've heard some people call it a zero draft, where I will just sit down and write like chapter, this happens, this happens, this happens, and kind of go through the book that way.
Uh-huh.
More just to get like a roadmap in my head than for actually like having something to follow. Because honestly, once I write it, I typically don't look at it again because over the course of writing it, I've figured out the midpoint, I've figured out the end, and kind of like the bridges that are going to connect all of these major points. And so like I keep it and I have it if I need to look at it, but I rarely do. And often the actual finished draft does not look a whole lot like the zero draft. But it's there and it helps me kind of wrap my head around it. So from that point, I draft it, I send it off. I typically do at least 3 rounds of developmental edits just because there's a lot of, again, like moving parts that need to be refined and make sure that they all make sense.
I love that though. And I think honestly, maybe I'm not an author, so you can totally be like, no, get out of here with that talk. But I feel like you can't over edit it, but maybe you can. Maybe you
No,
can.
you can't. I agree. Like,
I feel like too many people can't see it and like touch it and like fix it a little bit before it's like at some point you're like, okay, like we're good,
yeah.
put it out there. But I feel like I would rather have too many than not enough.
Yeah, it's kind of like I feel there is definitely such a thing as like too many cooks in the kitchen because you have to like have the people that you really vibe with, so, like my editor and my agent. Like we get each other, we understand like what we're trying to do, and I trust all of the notes that they give me because they've always been right. Um, so I don't like as long as you have those really trusted people, it's like you could edit a book forever. Like you never
Yeah.
really get to a point where you necessarily feel like it's done. You get to a point where it's like we don't know how to make this any better right now. Because then you look back at like your previously published stuff and it's like, I would do this differently. I would change that. And like, you just kind of have to like get to a point where you have peace with like, at the time that I wrote this book, I did the best that I possibly could. And hopefully, as your career goes on, you learn and you grow. And, the books that I'm writing right now are hopefully going to be better than the books that I wrote before. So,
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and I think readers like to see that change.
yeah.
You go
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, I got to see this person, like, straight out of the gate type situation, or maybe,
Yeah.
here and then they go back and like you can see the progress. At least for me, I think it's so fun. It's like
Yeah, I do too. And like the authors that I like to read, like it's fun to kind of track progress, I guess.
no, I think that's so cool. So with, again, you said you don't like to like major outline plot it out, but
Mhm.
especially for like this series, it's
Yeah.
not just one book, it's not just, duology. You have a few. How do you
Mhm.
find like the perfect place that you're like, okay, I'm gonna end here? And then like this is
Ooh,
how does like I've always wanted to know, especially like
yeah.
fantasy specifically, is
Mhm.
such a like it's that you got to ride that line so closely because it's like okay,
Yeah.
you want to like hook people in, but
So
you
you
also
don't, yeah.
want them to like hate you.
Yeah. Or like hate you in a fun way, you know? Um, I so I actually never thought that I was gonna be somebody who wrote series, funnily
Mhm.
enough. Like I was very intimidated by the idea of like having to sustain a story through multiple books. Um, so and here we are. But I think a big thing for me has been both of the series that I have published. It was like the ideas came to me as these series. So like the
Mhm,
Wilderwood ideas, I knew from the jump it was a duology, and this I knew from the jump was a trilogy. And I
mhm,
think that's really the key of figuring out like where to divide the story is because it was kind of already divided whenever I like had the idea.
mhm.
And I've always been like a trilogy girly as far as like movies and books and stuff. So I had a good idea of like this is how people structure this. And
Yeah.
like the end of your second book is supposed to be very like Dark Night of the Soul. Like where are we gonna go from here? Um, no spoilers.
I was gonna say, so what does that mean, guys?
you know. So I had so like figuring out the endings was never not like a huge issue, like just because I kind of knew going in, like here's how this story is divided up, and here, like all the other details. That's the stuff that was a bitch to figure out. But I knew where the endings are going to be.
That's awesome, and I think that's cool. And now I'm just gonna sit here and stress about the ending of Hemlock Queen because I'm like, oh great. Now my heart's gonna hurt, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm used to it. It's the genre that I picked. I know what's
Yep,
coming.
that's what we do here, baby.
How has that been for you? Again, obviously, your career, I feel like, has taken off in an awesome way. How has that been now? You mentioned, you love to read and stuff too, but being on the
Mhm.
other side, being the author and seeing readers' responses to your books and like how they interact with you, how has that been?
It's weird, man. Like in such a good way. Like it is like whenever people will reach out and like tell you what your book's meant to them, and like just that, like, hey, I like this, like that feels so nice and it's really really lovely. Especially because since I'm such a big reader, like there are books that I'm like, this means so much to me as a person, like this changed the way I thought about something, or this is something that just really spoke to me at a time that I needed it. And so the idea that I can write things that like have that effect on other people is really incredible and humbling, honestly. So um navigating social media, particularly as like a public figure, quote unquote, is always weird, and it's never not going to be weird, but the good definitely outweighs the bad.
That's awesome. And I think that's cool that you have both sides now that you
Yeah.
maybe being the reader, it like makes it, I don't know, because I feel like most authors like you guys are readers too. Like that's
Yeah, like you don't just
you
set out
write.
to write a book unless you like to read them. So
Yeah, if you love to read, I've heard so many people say like I started writing because I couldn't find a book that like specifically like
yes,
matched
same.
what I
Yep.
wanted, and so
Yeah.
I decided to write it.
Yeah. It is all just an exercise in self-indulgence.
It's like everyone thinks like, oh, authors are writing stuff that like we want. It's like actually we're writing stuff that we want to read.
Yeah. I just hope that y'all can come along for the ride, but like this is just to entertain myself for the most part.
That's awesome. So with your books, I think another thing personally, speaking for myself, but I think I can speak for a lot of people. Your covers on your books, stunning. Love
Love
them.
it.
So
I feel
fun.
it every time.
How do you go about like do you give a lot of opinions when it comes to that? Not a lot, or is it like how does that work?
So my publisher is great about kind of sending me the step by step of like, here's what we're thinking, here's kind of the concept and stuff, and being like, let us know if you hate it. And like, I'm sure I haven't to this point. Like everything they've sent me has just been incredible.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't have really anything to do with that other than being like, this looks great. Like that is all the art department.
So do you send, like, kind of early on in the process,
Sorry,
like,
my son
while
is
you're
yelling.
writing the book, you're like, "Here's a few things, like, maybe considering the cover," or, like, how does
Sometimes, so whenever we first sold for the wolf,
Mhm,
they asked for like my Pinterest board. So I got to send them that as far as just like a vibe. But now it's been the same artist at Orbit that has done all of my covers. So it's like
mhm.
we vibe. She knows. Like I don't gotta send it to her anymore.
Love that. Love that so much. I think that's so cool, and again, the book cover's obviously stunning, so
Yes, they
you're
do an
totally nailing
incredible.
it every single time because they're beautiful.
I know.
That's gonna be such a nice thing too, like, you put all this work and
It
time and effort
really
into,
is.
like, your beautiful book baby, and then you get, like, the perfect cover, and it's just, like, all
I
comes
know.
together so
It's
nicely.
like one of those things that you get anxious about that you didn't know to get anxious about until like you have a book about to come out and it's like, oh God, what if the cover sucks?
But it's cool that you don't have to worry about that because you have all these
Exactly. I
people.
have not. Orbit is, and honestly, like every book that they put out, like they just really kill it in the cover department, like across the board. So
I concur. I think
yeah,
they're pretty awesome. So, kinda going back, I know you don't love it, but your social media, stuff like that,
yeah,
how do you feel like, obviously with books coming out and stuff like that, that you try to best like, what is your kinda tactics to best market
yeah,
per se, or just, like, try to interact with people, when you obviously have something coming out, like, next week?
yeah. It's mostly I have just kind of gotten to a point where I am okay with stepping back if I need to. Like if
Mhm.
I'm not having fun anymore, if it's really weighing on me mentally, it's okay for me to take a few days and
Yeah.
step back. And I didn't really give myself permission to do that up until this year just because you know, social media is kind of where people sell a lot of books nowadays. And so you feel like sometimes you feel whenever you're stepping back that you're like missing out on opportunities, but that's not
Mhm.
really the case. Like, especially with the way the Instagram algorithm works, like the stuff I posted 4 days ago is what's going to be showing up in people's feeds. So who cares if I'm actually there that day? So I just try to um, make sure that I kind of have my own personal boundaries as far as how I interact and what I share and hold close to those
Mhm.
and give myself permission to step back when needed and try to have fun with it. Like, I enjoy making stuff for Instagram. I like taking photos. I like, fucking around on Canva for however long. So, I think as long as you can try to find the joy in it and be able to admit and reevaluate when there's no joy in it, you can get along fine.
Yeah, no, I understand that side, obviously not an
Yeah.
author, but, like, I understand the whole like,
Yeah.
I don't use Instagram as much. I probably should use Instagram more, but, like, I mean, TikTok, their algorithms all over the place too, and sometimes
Yeah,
it's just, like, when it feels more like a chore, you don't wanna do it anymore. It's like, you wanna do
exactly.
it fun, and when it
And that's like one of the reasons why Instagram is my only social media too, is because it's like I could get on other ones, but the time involved and I just I know that like even though there would probably be a benefit for me to like have a TikTok or whatever, and like the cost outweigh the benefit, at least right now. So
totally understand that, and
yeah.
I think protecting your peace is, like, so important.
Yeah.
Social media is always gonna be there in one way,
Yeah.
form, or another, as long as play the game a little bit, I think you're
Yeah.
good. What do you like to do?
Oh,
Obviously, amazing author. But when you're not being an author, what does your day look like if you're like, I'm taking
well,
a day to myself or,
oh god.
I
I
know.
like to go be fiscally irresponsible at the Ulta if I have a day to myself sometimes. I have 2 small kids, so, like, days to myself are few and far between, although my husband is wonderful, and he will sometimes be like, "You just go do what you need to do, like, we're good." Um, but I love to, God, what do I love to do? I was like, I love to read. Like, do I have any hobbies outside of my job? Not really. I like to eat snacks. And watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the 4th time. Um,
I love it though. Personality.
yeah. Here we are. Before I had my son, who was like currently singing us the song of his people in his crib. So apologies if you can hear him over the baby monitor. Um, Before I had him, I haven't really gotten back into it as much after, but I was like weightlifting, which was I really enjoyed, and I just haven't had the time to get back into it as much. But I was deadlifting like 275 before I got pregnant, and I still feel very proud of myself for that, even though I would, probably herniate a disc if I tried to do it now, but
I give you all the props for that. Like, all the props. That is so awesome. That is one thing I've never been good at is lifting weights ever.
yeah.
Like I've had to get back into working out because, in high school and stuff when you're doing all the sports, it's like, oh, you're at least
Yeah, it's like, oh, this just happens naturally.
no. Once you get
No.
older, it's like, oh, this is hard.
Yeah, like I'm 32 and my knees hurt.
Like my body's not working as naturally
No.
too. And so lifting weights is one of those things I'm still not good at. My fiance sometimes he's like, come to the gym with me. And I'm like, I'm going to Pilates.
Why would I do that? Well,
Like
I can't run. Like, I'm not a runner, so I was like, maybe I should try lifting weights instead. So
I
I enjoy that more.
I also
So
give people props to
someday I'll get back into it, and maybe someday I'll also like find a hobby that's not eating snacks while watching television or doing something that has to do with books. One can hope.
it's a vibe. I support it. Snacks are great. Food is
That's
delicious.
true.
Watching TV, my guilty pleasure is either reality TV or I don't know what it is about baking shows.
I
I
do
can
love a baking show.
check out of them. The Great British Bake Off, Nailed It, Is It Cake? All of those things that have to do with like
Yeah.
cakes or baking. You give them. I'm going to consume them all so fast.
We used to watch Chopped like it was a sporting event. Like
Yes,
we were invested in Chopped.
I just stumbled upon a new show. I don't remember what it's called right now. It's like the Springtime something, but it's
Yeah.
on Hulu, I think. No, it's I forget what it's on.
One
But
of them.
it's not on Netflix, so I like moved off Netflix and I found another baking show and I was like,
Yeah.
cool, I can start all over. And this one has like 13 seasons, and I was like, great,
Perfect. Excellent news.
perfect binging. Now I can just sit and do nothing.
Yep.
Empty thoughts, baking. I think that's the nice thing
Yeah.
about stuff like that. It's like, especially watching Buffy for like the fourth time, you already know
Yeah.
how it goes at this point. So it's like,
Like I know what's happening here. I just get to empty my brain.
no thoughts, just reactions.
Exactly. No thoughts, just spike.
That's awesome. Okay, well, circling back to author things, your book
Yeah.
comes out next week. Where can people find that and or some of the other books, obviously, that have already been out for a while?
Yeah. So all my books you can get wherever you happen to buy your books. If you would like signed copies, my local indie Parnassus Books in Nashville, you can order those online. You can pre-order Hemlock Queen signed or get any of my backlist signed. I will personalize it for you. If you want me to write something weird in there, go for it. And yeah, other than that, wherever they have books, you could probably find them.
Love that. Love that so much. And where can people, obviously, we already talked about it a little bit with your Instagram, but where can people best find you if they're like, all right, you know what? She's awesome and I want to engage more. Where can they get more involved with stuff with you?
I am on H. Whitten Writes on Instagram, and I have a Substack where the link is in my bio if you want to be annoyed by me even more.
Amazing. Love that. I'm here for it. I think you passed all the vibe checks for me today. I'm having a great
Oh,
time.
thanks. Woo!
I love when people, you can like come and chat on here, but that's why I love doing these. It's like meet the
Yeah.
author. And I obviously want to talk about your books, but it's like
Yes.
authors are so much more than just their books. Like you want to talk to them and like see their personality and stuff like that. And so I think
Yeah.
you're incredible. You're making me laugh all day.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, it's been so nice talking with you. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that maybe you want to just circle back to and say really fast before we wrap up today?
I don't think so. I think you covered it.
Awesome. Well, congrats on Hemlock Queen coming out
Thank
on
you so much.
tonight. So excited to have the next book in that series. And then everyone, I guess, be prepared because as we heard, she laid it out to us what we can expect by the ending of this book. So,
Anybody who thought that this book was going to have a happy ending hasn't been paying attention. So.
So what I'm hearing is on Wednesday or Thursday when I finish this, you just need to expect my name in your DMs to be like, Hannah, what
That's
was that?
fine. I
What was
will block it. I've like blocked out time for like I need to address the yelling.
All right, I have approximately a week after the book that I'm going to be getting a lot of angry people.
And that's what we like to hear.
If they're angry, they're invested, so it's good.
Precisely. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for jumping on with me today. I
Yes,
had so
thank
much
you so
fun
much for
chatting with
having me.
you.
This was super fun.
Yes, and you guys make sure you are staying involved with everything still happening here at Michaela's Book Nook here for more future author interviews, book reviews, and more. And until next time, thanks, guys.
Bye.